Greetings, everyone. I thought to share this in the wake of the reflections about our time in the United States when we held our immersion at the Blue Ridge Mountains during the hurricane, just before the hurricane, that is. But first of all, I wanted to take this as a chance to express my deep gratitude for all those extraordinary comments and sharings that particular reflections prompted and invoked in some of you. To me personally, this was very moving experience to read most of your comments. And it was very unusual for our kind of YouTube channel to experience such a large volume. And some of the comments were nothing short of deeply revealing personal insights and perspectives, aspirations. So thank you all. At the same time, some of the comments also reminded me that perhaps in this format of communication, it's at times necessary to speak to some of the aspects that may otherwise be taken for granted or missed altogether. So I thought to take this opportunity on this weekend of the Thanksgiving in the United States and North America in general, and some other parts of the world. Here, of course, in Mallorca, we don't celebrate this, but we celebrate this as joining the, let's say, celebrations of our brothers and sisters across the Atlantic. What I wanted to clarify with regard to those reflections shared a few days ago is, first and foremost, with regard to the experiences that the entire group had during that immersion. Because my sharings were purely from the point of view of the immersion's leader, someone who held the work. So it may come across as being somehow speaking to the, dissatisfied kind of, if not disappointing in terms of its expression. And I reassure you that wasn't the case. How I felt and what it meant for me personally is beside the point. Those were very, very personal, intimate sharings, but that does not mean that that was the shared experience in the group. So I'd like to first say that this was an extraordinary time together in every way. It was indeed challenging because just as we started to gather there, a few days in advance, our team has arrived at least 4 days in advance of the start of the program. And this was all happened as this whole area was brewing for the hurricane, not to spare any of those states deep within inland country, as it formed somewhere in a coastal line, as it usually does, over the Caribbean, Florida, and all that area, and just forcefully moved itself deep inside the land. All that culminated in a hurricane passing over as we have gathered in the large dining hall, nothing short of the canteen, the only size of that I recall in my military service, where several hundred people can dine at the same time. And there were indeed several groups, because that venue held several programs. We were just one such program. And we were all sitting there, away from the windows as we were advised, and witnessing how the hurricane was passing over. And what was extraordinary to me personally, and this is why I want to take this chance to clarify a few things, because reading the comments, it somehow came across as if we shouldn't have been there. And some of you even commented that, oh, I'm glad I didn't make it. No, no, no. Let me tell you, everyone made it. Everyone who was doubting last minute if they should not travel there, as they were all informed through their mobile devices, issuing hour by hour updates and saying everyone, stay put, stay in, don't go outside, emergency, urgent messages. 100% of the attendance of that particular program made it despite the hurricane. This was an extraordinary display of everything, if you ask me. Determination, faith, courage, all put together. We even had one 80-something old lady who already came to some of our previous programs. She said, well, I thought, shall I go or shall I not? And she just in the sharing in one of our circles that held by facilitators of this work during the immersion, she said, and this was her wholehearted experience, that I thought, well, if I meant to die, let me die there. Let me just go still. You know, that's the spirit in my books, in my understanding. So this cleared, hopefully, out. I want to also make sure that this particular program in the States was nothing short of true breakthroughs for many people. And as we have gathered together, just as I was saying, the hurricane was passing over, there was this incredible sense of stillness that I have personally experienced. And this was shared amongst ourselves. Like, for example, we had two guests of honor there, Dr. Suhas, a very well-known astrologer, and Stuart Savatsky. We were sitting with Stuart on a sofa just as the hurricane was hovering over, and just exchanging this kind of like glances and holding like little conversation there, how peaceful it felt on the inside at the very same time. So this is maybe adjusting what I have shared in terms of my assessment of the state of collective consciousness in the United States, which I still emphasize was not something just accidentally thrown in the form of the reflections. Or could it be that my personal experience at the program were basically by large due to the fact that the hurricane of that magnitude went across the 5 states? Yes, of course, all that contributed, but not in a way that it was perceived in the field as we sat there meditating, and at times outside of the meditative programs during the darshans or during the sleep and rest time. So going back to what I have shared, I still stand by my experiences and insights that it is indeed consciousness needs to be upheld now more than ever in that particular country, because the United States is a very important country today in the world. Everyone knows that. By sheer fact that it's the greatest influx of cultures. It's the country which also, since some time, is considered to be the country that wields its power. Whether it wields it in the right way or wrong way, it still holds that power. Before the transition of powers towards perhaps newly formed or forming as we speak world order, which maybe will create, as every economist and specialist in the field has been telling us for the past at least 2 decades, that the shift towards Asian influences and Asian dominance, headed by China, India, and Russia as the greatest alliance, is perhaps the new forming world order in terms of the economics, and likewise, of course, politics, because goes like this. But these reflections were not about the repercussions of the geopolitical situation around the world. America, United States here in particular, holds important place. Important place because it is in the United States that new ideas were always bringing fruits, always sprouting. It's the country which is formed out of some total of aspirations, of longings. It was considered to be the new world. It was considered to be the newly found heaven. Yes, it was at the expense of extraordinary and murderous incentive of how it was built, because at that time, that new heaven was at the expense of pushing some people into a hellish existence. So the natives had to suffer because the Europeans have discovered paradise, and they would have to accommodate them and their ideology to give that space. So of course we can speak about it also as some kind of clash within consciousness where this battle is being held, and now the resolutions, karmic ones above all else, are playing themselves out. Centuries of slavery, which also are deeply, deeply rooted in the way the United States functioned as a country. Even as it declared its independence, it still did not abolish the slavery. So all these deep conflicts within the country, whilst at the very same time imbued with that spirit of innovation, imbued with that kind of what is called hope, that pioneering spirit, is now finding its way into what we all live right now as the 21st century, which is going to be perhaps heralded by those who will write this history, or if history would need to be written at all, with no idea. Some have declared history has ended there and then. We're like literally pushed to live in the here and now of the battle for our minds in terms of the information. And of course, that informing us, forming us, coagulating our individualized consciousness into something is what United States has been doing for a long time. And now we can see things, we can see all the true colors coming to the light of our awareness, and this is why it is important that the consciousness of that country is being upheld at the point of balance. This was my initial, let's say, incentive behind that sharing that received so much, by large, positive responses from you as those who have took part in those sharings, and I'm again deeply grateful. I don't take it for granted for a moment. One more thing I'd like to add to those who have expressed perhaps reservations about my reflections being, well, tinted, if not tainted, by biases of me coming from that particular part of the world, growing up in Uzbekistan. Let me just give the background. My mother was born in the whole site of that family in western Ukraine, not far from the city of Lvov, now called Lviv, which used to be part of Poland. In the small town of Rovno, which today is called Rivno, which is part of the western Ukraine. So anyone who has been throwing at me somehow pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian sentiments, I would invite you to seriously look at it again. My father, on the other hand, is born in Kanibadam, a small town high in the mountains of Tajikistan. And I was born in Uzbekistan. Okay? So with that mixed background, when I first time came to St. Petersburg, Moscow and other Russian cities well into my teens, to me it was a culturally new experience, because growing in Asia, in largely Muslim country, was a very different experience. I have no ties with Russia whatsoever. So how can that make me pro-Russian, except of speaking Russian as my mother's tongue? And to that I can tell you, there are many, many guys out there in Mongolia who speak Russian just as well as I do. Likewise in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Slovakia, Czechia, Bulgaria. Likewise deep in Siberia or down in any of the Central Asian countries. Because Russian language is like English, believe it or not. Russian language was the language, yes, of the colonial times, and just as English is the language which has united a lot of nations and people across very large terrains. So I thought just to throw this in so that there is a bit of clarity with regard to, let's say, my personal position with regard to geopolitics and everything. I'm saying that because some were triggered. I've called Biden's actions, which goes to tremendous escalation as we can see it right now. You know, it will take a blind not to in Ukraine and potentially across the whole entire Europe. So, what else is there to add? Let me just maybe end these sharings with something which I don't usually do, is to share something which adds the note of hope and brings perhaps some of what have tentatively been always sensed in this months of utter and sheer uncertainty of where the world is, of where we are, in every sense, in every respect. So when we were at the end of our program in Poland, which, as some of you may recall, I have contrasted to our experiences in the United States, which again, I emphasize, was a tremendously joyous experience for the majority of the group. We're now releasing videos from that time, and it is for you to check the quality of the inquiries that are brought out into the open in our Q&A sessions. Of course, I cannot tell you what our experiences were in meditation, but some of the participants, including team members of our program in the States, have left their comments. You may want to read them. But when we were in Poland, towards the end of our program, I had this extraordinary vision. I don't recall exactly whether that was whilst we were still in Poland or immediately upon my return to the island of Mallorca. But this was a vision in that semi-transcendent state when I was coming out of rest and before the waking state of consciousness will be fully kicked in. I beheld this extraordinary scene, which if I was to make movies, will definitely would have to find its way into how to give it a cinematic form. It was the scenery of the, well, extraordinary, I'm just struggling a bit to find the right words so as to give it that, let's say, give off that fragrance, that flavor. Anyway, let me try, let me give it a go. So there was this scene of the vast landscape, and it was very early hours of the morning, so it's just this really, the shape of things, the silhouettes are not cut out very sharply, everything is in a slight mist. And what I could behold is that there is this riders coming from the valley, and as they approach, come closer and closer, I started recognizing these characters that were riding this, and they were coming from various different cultures. These were like almost as if there is this some kind of display of all the characters from different parts of our history, shared history, in all the armor and magnificence, men, women, gods-like, demigods-like, obviously humans-like. Some of them have this tribal appearance, others have this royal appearance of the knights, others have this appearance of the wild creatures. But what felt very strongly as some of these characters were passing literally right, as if I could smell the breath of the horses and of the riders themselves, is that these were these forces, these ancient, timeless, archetypal forces that all are here right now as riders. And they are, whether they are reincarnating, whether they are landing from somewhere, whether the earth opened up and they appeared, wherever they come from, these archetypal forces are all here right now. They're all joining the battlefield, as it were, between light and darkness. This was the immediate impression that I had just as I was still beholding that vision. Yes, let me add that many will roll their eyes, let them do that. Many will also question this to be a kind of a psychic experience. Why would spiritual teacher throw it up on us? Yes, I'm not here to say that what I beheld has value which can be translated into, let's say, the way of how we understand everything in our rational way of understanding. But to me it felt as some forces within nature, within awareness, which in this case is spoken interchangeably, rising to uphold what needs to be upheld during that time. And of course, after reflecting on this experience, it also felt to me the analogy between this, let's say, what comes across in various cultures, that these incarnations that's supposed to support and uphold the Dharma, uphold the way of life, uphold the way of righteousness, uphold the way of light, has that quality of the rider, quality of the Kalki, who's supposed to be as the 10th incarnation of Vishnu avatar, right, Mahavatars, the 10th, and he's riding the horse. It's the incarnations of the powers of the, let's say, what described in the Apocalypse, where the power of Christ appears to be as the rider. You see, so this interesting analogies there, and whether this was the impact of a result of some kind of psychic information throwing itself, it felt very, very empowering and uplifting. So when I came out of that restful state, and when I was reflecting on what this particular experience meant, I felt there and then that it is a confirmation that these powers are on the rise and they're showing themselves in full display. So I thought to share this and add to this, follow up to the reflections shared a few days ago. And I'll leave you all with this in good faith, in good spirit, and a belated thank you to all on this Thanksgiving Day. I mean, Thanksgiving weekend, I meant. Thanksgiving was a few days ago, on Thursday. All right, folks, bye for now.